Hey fellow founders, how you going? Welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm talking about how you can buy a five-letter .com domain name for your startup without breaking the bank. Now, is it easy? No. Are you going to have to make some sacrifices? Yes, but I'm going to show you how I did that for my current startup, Oqire, in just a minute. But first of all, I want to talk about why I feel it's important to own a short, brandable domain name. And when I think about a lot of the tools that I use in my day-to-day life, in a work situation, you think of Slack or you think of Clary. If you're not familiar with that, it's a sales forecasting tool. These are kind of short names. Even if you go outside of that, like Uber, they're short names. And even if they're common words like Slack or even Uber's fairly common, the companies can kind of own that name and they can create brandability around it. Even something a little bit more quirky like Clary, again, it's not a very common word. Well, it's not really an actual word. They spell it C-L-A-R-I, but because they have the .com and because it's a little bit unique, they can kind of own that. So if someone within, the niche of sales software says Clary, everyone's going to have that name recognition and know exactly what they mean. Now, with my previous startup, it was called Task Pigeon, and it was a double-barreled name, right? It's got two common words stuck together, and it sounds okay. It sounds, you're probably going to have some name recognition, but in my opinion, and in my experience, it's just not as brandable, right? You've got two common words, Task, Pigeon, you stick them together. Hey, it sounds okay, as I said, but, there's also a Task Rabbit, and someone could come along and create, a Task other animal, Task Dog, and it's a dog walking business or something. And now all of a sudden you've got confusion in the market as to potential confusion at least, and you're fighting and spending dollars to strengthen or reinforce who your brand is, and differentiate from other people who have similar names, as opposed to just having something unique that you can kind of really own. So I know it's a little bit of a vague, not vague statement, but a little bit of a round the world explanation, but that's why I feel owning a short number of letter .com domain name is pretty important, and can actually have some lasting value, especially if you do manage to scale and become like quite a big company like a Slack. Now, in the meantime, if you can't get the .com, getting something like getslack.com or slackapp.com I think is a viable alternative. And of course you have the .co there as well. But today's video, I'm specifically showing you how you can find a five-letter .com domain name if you want. So I'm going to flip over and share my screen for a second, because one of the people often do is they'll come onto a website like Brand Bucket and they're looking for a premium domain name that fits their business. And this is where I started, to be honest. I was like, hey, I know what I want my app to do, but I don't really have a name for it. So, hey, maybe there's something out there already. But very quickly you can see, while some of these names are quite interesting, like HeyPlate or Inklayer, these names could definitely work depending on what your startup does. If you're creating a restaurant app, heyplate.com, like it's pretty cool. It's fairly brandable in my opinion, but you're spending $3,000, $3,500, $2,500, $5,000, whatever it is, right? And this money, in my opinion, especially in the early days of a startup, can be better spent on building out the product and actually marketing to get customers. So while sites like this exist, you can also see that a lot of them are those double barrel names. They're two words put together that sound pretty good, but not always you're going to be able to really own and create like that lasting branding value, in my opinion, around some of these. So what I did, as I said, there are some sacrifices you have to make, and the number one sacrifice is you can't have a name in mind already. Okay, so now I've jumped over to the GoDaddy auctions website, and I'm just going to run you through how I do this process. As I said, you do have to make some sacrifices in order to find a five-letter .com domain name that's going to be super cheap, but here's how I go about it. So first of all, I want to come over to advanced search. I want to select characters no more than 5. By default, these are normally ticked, so untick those because you don't want dashes or digits in your domain name. Obviously, we're looking for a .com. I'm specifically looking for something that hasn't really been bid up as well. So I put bids less than 1 because we're trying to find something that, doesn't have, 10 or 20 bids and might currently be under our max price of 200, but is going to increase in value pretty quickly. And then once you run that search, you're going to get a bunch of results that look like this. Now, as I said, there's a little bit of sacrifice and there's a little bit of work that's going to go into this, because as you can see, a lot of these names don't actually make any sense whatsoever. So like, what's a WeTog.com? Like, it's just not something that we can brand ourselves. The other thing I do is filter or sort via estimated value, so you kind of get the names that should make a little bit more sense first. But in my instance, Oqire.com, it came up in one of these lists. And when I look at the Wayback Machine history of Oqire.com, it was actually owned by a property company many years back, and they were buying and selling property. And then when I look to my use case, which is about helping sales engineers and salespeople come together to understand the problems of their potential customer or the prospect, and then craft compelling demos to help win business. Again, it's about acquiring customers. So acquire, like there was that kind of resonance between Oqire.com and what I was trying to achieve with the software. So anyway, once you've done this search, you want to kind of go through this list, and it might take 30 minutes a day, and it might take you 5, 6, 7 days or even longer to find a name that works. But if you do this, as I was saying, like you can kind of scroll through, and a lot of these, like 99%, are just going to be like trash, and you can skip through them. But every now and then you're going to see a name that pops out and has some brandability. So we're just going to try and find one here so I can kind of like talk to the process or the experience of doing this. Not seeing anything just yet. I mean, there's a few that may be a little bit quirky, but trying to find something that stands out a little bit more and is a little bit more kind of user friendly, so to speak. We'll go on to another page. So again, you can see like this process isn't like, hey, you're going to get the exact domain name you want. You're trying to find something that fits whatever idea it is that you have. And I think that's one of the other things. A lot of people kind of feel that they need to buy a domain name before they can start working on their startup. That couldn't be further from the truth. Like, you don't need having a domain name doesn't mean that you have a startup. Like, having the idea, working on the idea, trying to validate the idea, you can do all these things before you have your name. So yeah, looking through some of these, not seeing anything that stands out immediately to me. Really hope we can find one just so I can kind of speak to that experience a little bit more. Okay, like this isn't great because it's double barreled, but like Hype VR, potentially, if you're a VR startup, like that could be of interest. But I'm trying to find like one word, not that double barrel kind of word, or putting two kind of words together. And also you do want, you want to be conscious of the spelling and that kind of thing as well. Like I know Oqire is spelled a little bit differently, Oqire, but in that instance, it like makes, I guess, phonetic sense almost, like Oqire, but even though it's spelled differently. So like I'd keep that in mind as well. Hopefully we have a little bit of luck here today, because I did just want to kind of show this end-to-end process. But I did this with Oqire, like, it probably took me maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before I saw that name. And there's obviously other auction sites other than GoDaddy. I'm specifically obviously looking for things that are super low cost. So if you did have a little bit more of a budget, again, not like the brandable ones, like $3, $4, $5 but hey, you might want to spend $300 or $400. You might be able to find something a little bit easier. TrueZoo. Okay, like, this isn't a perfect example, but for the purposes of today, like if we look at this, like TrueZoo, it's a bit unique. It's a bit different. You could own that, brand, right? You could create a brand around TrueZoo. Maybe it's trying to think like what kind of startup that might suit. Like maybe a reviews website or something like that, or a platform that allows people to leave product reviews, and you can manage those product reviews. Like with the true part. Again, it's still kind of like two words, TrueZoo, so not exactly what I'm after. But again, just one example of where you might be able to find something that, fits whatever startup that you're doing. And you're going to know your brand and what you're trying to create and your startup, idea a lot better than I can, speaking to the masses here on YouTube. So you might have already seen some names that kind of stand out and would have worked for you. Now, there is going to be, as I said, quite a lot of trash within this list because it's random 5-letter domain names, right? So you are looking for that needle in a haystack. Now, if you don't want to go through this process and you do just want a .co domain name and you want it to be a double-barreled name, obviously you can have a domain name, within a matter of minutes. I just think it's worth putting in the effort to find something that you can create a brand around, even if that brand is something that you have to find rather than create yourself, right? So I didn't come up with the name Oqire, obviously. We'll just do one more page, I think, and then we'll call it a day. But this is the process that I went through. So, you can kind of get a sense of how long it does take and that it isn't just immediate. Let's go one more page. One more page. It isn't just immediate in terms of what you can find. Delete. Okay, not ideal. All right, well, that was a bit of a bust today. But if I come back to everyone on the screen, do that every day, 5-6 days in a row, and you're going to start to find some names. That was my process. Comment down below what you think of it. Always happy to comment back and forward, especially with fellow founders. So catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.